my rib cage, squeezing my back muscles, squeezing my tushy. Oh my gosh, I still have a little bit of hair. Okay, so grab some water and let's enjoy our voices. Hello. Thank you for joining me. This is the third episode where I teach you how to get the most joy from your voice. So I wrote this series with two goals in mind. One, I want you to get the most joy from your voice. And two, I really want you to be able to coach yourself through any song. So if you watch all the episodes in a row, then you're going to get a good amount of information to feel confident in your singing and to coach yourself through any song. Isn't that what we all want as singers? We just want to be able to nail that perfect song. So in the first video, we got into our mindset, the right mindset for how we should be thinking about singing. And in the second episode, we talked about our first drill. And I didn't give you a lot of context to why we were doing that drill, but I hope you did it. I hope you enjoyed it. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the anatomy, and I think you're going to start understanding why I asked you to do that specific drill. So grab some water and let's enjoy our voices. So one of the main purposes in me having you do that ha exercise was because I wanted you to start doing your mental x-rays. Now, I had a coach once tell me that I shouldn't feel anything when I sing. And that made no sense to me because I felt everything. I want you to notice when it feels right and when it doesn't feel right. So with the ha exercise, you're really getting to understand how all of these things should feel. That ha exercise really gets you into a good placement and a healthy placement where you won't strain if you stay in that placement. Other instructions I got that really confused me were sing high like you sing low. Pretend your lungs are the walls. Project. And I kid you not, sing out your butt. That was one I laughed at forever. But there were a lot of instructions that I really didn't understand because they weren't given to me in a language that I understood them in. And while I got some really great voice teachers, I had some really amazing direction. I really didn't understand what they were saying until I started really diving in, doing my own research, figuring out the anatomy of what is actually going on with your voice. And I really trusted the drills to do some magic. I drilled, and to my surprise, my voice never really got very much more powerful. And that really frustrated me. I really wanted to have like those big, powerful moments in my singing. And while I could do a lot of really other beautiful things, I just never really got power until I started figuring it out on my own. So while I was on this journey to find power in my voice, I saw a lot of instructions that were telling people to push their voices. And I couldn't believe it. Pushing your voice is not something that you should ever do. It wasn't something I've ever been comfortable with, and I never will be comfortable with it. It is just not the same as getting power. It actually can damage your voice. So if you're pushing, don't do it. That's a big no-no. And it should be enough that it's bad for your voice, but it actually doesn't sound the same as having real power. If you push your voice, you don't have nearly the resonance that you have if you actually have power behind your voice. So I read a lot of books. I started doing experiments on myself and then on others to try to find the key to getting real power. And I think I figured it out, and I'm ready to show you. And this isn't really typical. I know in a lot of voice lessons, there's a lot of analogies like sing like a witch, or me, do nays. And I wish that I had been told that that was working my nasal muscles to be able to grip the air pressure. So that's just one example, but once you have a better understanding of the mechanics behind singing, I think it's much easier to coach yourself through any song. So let's demystify some of these concepts. And I'm just explaining it in the way that I understand it, but everybody learns a little bit differently. So if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments so that I can clarify. And because we're talking about things we can't see, I have Tony here to help us visualize what is happening in our own bodies. Another way to become familiar with your instrument is to do mental x-rays. So I'm going to be asking you to do a lot of that. Because like riding a bike, giving instruction on how to do it is not the same thing as your body learning how to do it. So doing that mental x-ray really helps you become in tune with what's happening. It helps you embody the concepts, and then you don't really have to think about it much after that. And once we start tuning into what's happening in one area, we can tune in to the smaller and smaller and smaller details, and we can really fine tune all of these little things that we can work on. So let's go over step by step how we sing and what muscles we're using when we sing. Let's start with the breath. Take a big belly breath. Push your belly out as far as you can. And what you're feeling is your diaphragm pushing your organs out of the way, providing room for your lungs. And that's where most coaches start. I believe that singing starts in the pelvic floor. So that's where I start. I try to visualize my pelvic floor muscle being the one to really start to open up to get the air. And once your belly is nice and big, you can just simply relax it and a lot of the air comes out. But I just relaxed, and listen, I still have so much air, and what I have to do is I have to start squeezing my abs to start getting the air out, squeezing my rib cage, squeezing my back muscles, squeezing my tushy. Oh my gosh, I still have a little bit of air. Okay, so now that we have squeezed all of those muscles, we start to realize how many muscles are involved with just getting the breath out. Never underestimate the power of squeezing your tushy, because that's one of the oldest tricks in the book. When you really need that little bit of extra power, squeeze your tushy and it makes it happen. I think it has something to do with the pelvic floor. I think the pelvic floor is an unsung hero to our bodies. And I think in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to start hearing more about what our pelvic floor is actually doing for us. Mock me. And when we're practicing our breathing exercises, a lot of coaches will encourage you to stand up. I encourage you to do both. Try it standing up, try it sitting down. You'll notice that you have access to a little bit less of your muscles when you are sitting down. So singing, standing up is always going to be a little bit better. I sing at a piano most of the time, and so I'm kind of at a disadvantage. That is until I get better accompaniment. You know, one day when I'm famous and one day when I have the piano player of my dreams accompanying me, being able to play way better than me, but we work with what we got, so I sit. Okay, now I want you to do the same thing, take a big breath, but I want your attention and your mental x-ray to be on your Adam's apple, on your voice box. It's very, very subtle, but your diaphragm and your voice box are directly connected. So when you take a big belly breath, you will have just the slightest pull on your Adam's apple. Adam's apple, voice box, larynx, all the same thing. Your diaphragm is connected to your larynx. And we'll learn more about the larynx in just a second. And as you release your breath, you can choose whether to release it without engaging your larynx at all, or you can choose to engage. So do those two things. One breath, don't engage. Second breath, barely engage, and I mean barely engage. Try it. Mental x-ray again. Now go back and forth between these two until you can figure out what muscle it is that is allowing you to engage your larynx. Now I'm going to give you the answer here in just a second, so pause if you need to, but I really want you to look deeply in yourself and figure out what's going on. Why is it so easy to engage the larynx? on demand? And what muscles are we using? Did you figure it out? Because I'm about to tell you the answer. There's a couple tiny little muscles in the larynx that help get it vibrating when you're releasing your breath. I think sometimes people flex these muscles thinking that it's going to help provide them power because we imagine that that's where the energy is coming from. But it's wrong. Oh, is it wrong? The power is coming from the parts of our voice that are supporting the air. And our larynx is not really supporting the air. The larynx is just allowing the air to go through. Where does the power come from? It's coming up. Calm down. So the muscles that you use to just gently engage your larynx, you should never really use those muscles more than that. You barely use those muscles, and that's fine. Okay, next exercise. We're going to take 2 breaths. The first breath, we're going to release and barely engage the larynx like we did in our last exercise. And the second breath, we are going to provide a little bit more energy. So do it with me. Now, what muscles did we engage to provide that better, more open, more resonating sound? Pause and think about it. Look within yourself. You can do this. Okay, did you figure it out? I'm about to give you the answer. So your tongue is pushing your larynx into place, and your neck muscles are opening up your throat. And these muscles that we're using to open up our throat are deconstrictor muscles. So opposite from constricting muscles, they're opening things up. And this plays a huge role in the quality of sound. And here's a really interesting thing. Our vocal folds, or our vocal cords, whatever you want to call it, are encased in our larynx, and they vibrate to produce a sound. And you probably already knew that. But did you know that when you're singing high, you're using a portion of your vocal folds? And when you're singing with the middle of your range, you're using a portion of your vocal folds. But when you're singing at the lower part of your range, you're using the whole vocal folds. Who would have thought? This was huge for me because I always focused on my high voice, trying to get higher, higher, higher. And once I realized that the lower part of your range can actually really give a good workout to your whole range, boy, did that change the game for me, because it takes a lot less effort to sing low than it does to sing high. So when we can start off our exercises really low, we can vibrate the whole vocal folds, we can really get all of the mucus off of our vocal folds, and then it really primes us to sing for our whole range. Now I can get my voice warmed up a lot faster. And I found a lot of joy in those lower tones. So if you haven't been doing the ha that I taught you in the last episode, I suggest that you start doing it. Okay, now we've figured out where the air begins until we've started to produce a sound. So what next? So once we've produced a sound, the sound vibrates everything that it touches. And everything that it touches changes the sound. I think I should say that twice because that's really important. Everything that the sound touches vibrates. And everything that it touches changes the sound. It is quite literally an interaction between you and the whole world around you. And a lot of times we think about singing out of our mouths. But did you know that humans have 2 horns? Yeah, I can't take myself seriously. So we can sing from our mouths, we can sing from our nose, or we can use them together. And together we can really get the best sounds. So once the larynx has produced a sound, it hits 4 major areas that I really want to talk about. Number 1, the pharynx. Let's get Tony for this. And I should have grabbed Tony to talk about our voice box. So here is our voice box, our larynx. There it is. And then do you see this long red line here? That's our pharynx. And in medical terms, they talk about the laryngopharynx, the oropharynx, and the nasopharynx. You don't need to memorize those. I'm not going to talk about them again. I'm going to use the lower, the middle, the upper pharynx. I think that makes more sense for us. It is a large surface for the sound to bounce off of, and it backs our oral cavity and our nasal cavity, so both horns that we were talking about. And when we do that exercise and we try to make it bigger and bigger and bigger, what we're doing is we're using more and more and more of our pharynx when we make it bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's a really good exercise for so many reasons, but oh my gosh, just go do it, okay? I like to compare the pharynx to a trampoline. Now, if you are using this little tiny trampoline, you're going to get a little bounce. If you are using this big trampoline, you're going to get a bigger bounce. So the idea is elastic material stretched over a surface, and when something hits the surface, the object bounces off. Your material has to be taut or stretched tight enough. It has to have elasticity itself. It has to be even. And it has to have enough supporting structure strong enough to withstand the weight of the people jumping. So imagine the material isn't stretched properly across your trampoline. It's going to get saggy and you're not going to get a good bounce. If it's not elastic enough, it's going to be too stiff to get a good bounce. If it's more taut in one area than it is in another, you're not going to get a very good jump. And finally, if you don't have the supporting structure to hold up the weight, it's going to collapse during a big jump. Okay, now we know our goals with the pharynx. It should be taut, elastic, even, and have support. So that exercise does so much. It drops our Adam's apple, lengthening our pharynx. And every time we go more hooty, it's making our pharynx more taut. And changing notes until all of your notes are smooth is going to help keep the elasticity even over your entire pharynx. And then flexing those deconstricting muscles and the tongue to hold your throat open is really strengthening the support of the pharynx so the pharynx can withstand large amounts of air pressure, allowing the most beautiful resonant notes to come out sounding easy. So the bottom of our pharynx is what makes that chest voice. And if we want to be able to take our chest voice higher and higher or provide more power to those upper notes, we have to provide more support for the lower part of our pharynx. So doing that exercise, going higher and higher and higher, really flexes those muscles to try to support the lower part of your pharynx for as much of your range as possible. And that is going to really train your muscles to support those higher notes and make it sound more powerful. Whew. That was quite the crash course. Obviously, the pharynx is very, very important, and we're going to talk about it a lot. So if you don't quite understand, please comment what I can clarify for you, please. At the same time that your sound hits your pharynx, it's going to hit the lower part of your tongue, and it is going to interact with every part of your tongue until the sound is completely out of your mouth. Remember, the bottom part of our tongue helps us position our larynx, and the tip of our tongue helps us articulate our words. So what does the middle of the tongue do? Try to do ha. I don't want to give you all the answers. I want you to try to see if you can figure any of these out yourself. What is the middle of your tongue doing? The middle of your tongue is directing the sound toward a specific part of your pharynx. That's a big deal the pharynx is not a muscle. So the tongue and these deconstricting neck muscles are everything that you need to work on when it comes to getting the most out of your pharynx or getting what you want out of your pharynx. And our tongue does a lot of non-singing jobs. When we are eating, our tongue is moving the food around our mouth so we can position it to chew on it, and it's swallowing for us, and doing all of those things really build up a lot of tension in the tongue, and that can hinder it from being flexible enough to do exactly what we want in any given moment. And that can really hinder the quality of sound that we're producing. The exercise really does help release some of the tension in the tongue. But in the next episode, I'm going to give you a major tip on how to get rid of tension in the tongue, so watch for that. Now we look at our soft palate. Here's Tony's soft palate. But if you can feel it with your tongue, right behind your teeth, that's your hard palate. And all the way back, it gets soft. That's your soft palate. And as you can see, that is where the sound splits off. Some of your sound is going to go into your mouth. Some of the sound is going to go into your nose. And there's really only two things that you can do with your soft palate. You can leave it in an upward facing, or you can try to bring it down. I hope that makes sense. But bringing your soft palate down is really the best thing for tone. And try to experiment with this. Try to produce a sound with your soft palate up and then try again with it down. Okay, you want to hear me do it? Okay, fine, I'll do it. It's not going to be pretty. There you go. There it is with my soft palate up versus Do you hear the difference? The one tone is a lot more resonant than the other tone. So I suggest that you really learn how to keep that soft palate down. Okay, last I want to talk about our nasal area. Our nasal area. Our nasal area. That is our upper horn. It's very important for singing. And we can hear it when we go, me, 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 me. Or we can relax it and say, me, 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 me. When we flex those muscles, we're really making that pathway more narrow. And sometimes that's exactly what we want. Sometimes we have a lot of air pressure and you really want that area to be narrow. And then sometimes you want to go ahead and release it and open it up. So that can be really important depending on the styling that you're going for. Also, when you're hitting a high note and you don't want to make it, you can really grasp that air with your nasal area to try to give it a little bit more style and not make it sound so opera-y. Opera-like, opera-esque. I don't know the right term, you know what I'm talking about. So now you have an overview of the different parts that you have to produce a sound and some of the tools that you can use to tweak the sound. Now, is it possible to think about all of those different things while you're singing a song? No, which is why it's really important to get familiar with them now, get familiar with your body, and then let your body take over when you're singing, just like riding a bike. Repetition really makes a difference. Doing these mental x-rays while you do your drills are really going to help register that into muscle memory. And once you have that down, then you can really coach yourself through any song. I want to end this video with a quote. People in their right minds never take much pride in their talents. That's from To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I hope you guys enjoyed. Next episode, I'm teaching you another drill and we're going to go through one of my favorite tips. So stay tuned for that. I love you guys so much. Mwah. Suggested to push your voice and I was in shock. I will never, oh my gosh, open up your throat so that the resonant so that your whole pharynx can vibrate. Pharynx, we're going to talk about it. Calm down. You are using a portion of your vocal. But did you know that when you're singing really high, you're using But did you know that when you're singing really high, you're using a portion of your vocal cords? That's not what I want to say. Oh my gosh, Jessica, say what you want to say. Okay, when you're using the middle of your range, you are. And don't forget to enjoy your voice. Don't forget to be a little bit silly.